I always like to say, I love to try and bring the story behind our food into nutrition because it kind of brings the food alive and it helps to tell the story of that food to then really value the food and appreciate the food. And actually, there's all sorts of positive impacts in just valuing food as far as our health goes.
Welcome back to the Force of Nature podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Lucy Williamson, a veterinary surgeon turned nutritionist whose work bridges the worlds of farming, food, and health. Our conversation dives deep into the powerful connections between gut health and soil health. Lucy shares her journey from veterinary medicine into human nutrition and why understanding the gut microbiome is essential not only for individual well-being but also for the way we think about our farming and food systems. We talk about the importance of valuing farmers as true providers of health, the role of community engagement and education in reconnecting people with their food, and how ancestral wisdom can guide modern nutrition. Along the way, Lucy gives us practical insights on diet diversity, the benefits of sourdough, and simple steps we can all take to nurture our own gut. This is a conversation that highlights just how deeply our bodies are interconnected with the land that feeds us, and it's something that I am very passionate about. So without further ado, let's get into it. How are you today, Lucy?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, excited to be here. Thank you.
That's awesome. Can you please give an introduction for yourself and share a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm now a registered nutritionist, but I do have a background as a vet in agriculture, actually, which gives me a kind of unique perspective on our food system, I think. And yeah, so I was practicing as a vet for about 15 years, and then I had about 10 years as a mum bringing up our family, and then the last 10 years I've been in my current role as a nutritionist. And I think fundamentally I've always just loved the connection with nature, and actually, reflecting on perhaps why I moved out of one pretty good career into another one. Part of my drive to become a vet was because I just wanted to stay outside as much as I loved animals, and I had no agricultural background growing up. So yeah, a love of nature, a love of a very sort of natural approach to health, and ultimately I really wanted to get into human health, and I have done that via a master's in nutrition. So here I am in my current role.
That's awesome. So what created such a dynamic shift from going from a vet to being in the human health space?
Yeah, so I think it just evolved over time, and I was always fascinated about food, actually. So as a vet, I guess more in small animal practice, I would always sort of try to see if I could solve a problem with food first. So like digestive issues or skin issues, maybe like allergy type things. And actually had quite a lot of success with that, which I thought was quite interesting. And I mean, this was like 30 years ago. So, it was quite, it wasn't being done all that much, I guess. So that fascinated me. And I love being outdoors on farms, but actually I began to really enjoy the sort of human connection with my clients. So whenever I got something better, whether it was on the farm or whether it was in the clinic, I think people are so attached to their animals that, it was this wonderful sort of, wow, I'm really helping here, and really began to enjoy that sort of human connection even more. And then, so we had the sort of fascination in food, we had the human connection, the love of being outdoors as a vet in a sort of very natural lifestyle, if you like. I mean, I love being outdoors, as a family, we love being outdoors. And then I guess the final piece of the jigsaw was as a mother with young children, just really wanting to do the right thing by them and to really understand food properly. And ultimately, I'd been away from work for 10 years and I wanted to go back to work, but I was pretty sure I didn't want to go back to being a vet, and I wanted to kind of follow this growing passion in food. And I just had the chance, where we live now on the edge of London, to go and do a master's at King's College in London. And actually that was when I very first heard about the gut microbiome. I hadn't, that was about 11 years ago now, and I literally hadn't heard about it before then. So it just kind of opened a door for me to a whole new world, and here we are, as they say. The rest is history.
That's awesome. Did you hear anything about like the gut microbiome in terms of animal health in your time as a vet, or was that still quite unheard of
No,
science.
no, literally, I don't think any of us knew anything about it. Certainly, 100% no teaching on it. No, I mean, to be honest, the research around the gut microbiome is, as you probably well know, it's sort of 10, 15 years old. Most of what we know at the moment that's fairly sort of new research. So I think it's, has all really developed rapidly in the time since I was practicing as a vet. But it's something I've thought about a lot. And if I was practicing as a vet now, I would definitely be using that for sure.
Yeah, I can see that. So how did you find taking on study it at a later stage in life? Was that difficult?
Oh, yeah, that was interesting because when I was first at university, we weren't using computers. I qualified in 1991 as a vet, so it was that part of me, I think, was the hardest thing, was getting used to that sort of digital world. But actually, it's been the brilliant thing because it keeps your brain really active, and it's kept me really curious. And more than anything, in many ways, having teenagers growing up in the house as well, understanding the technology actually that they're using and what they're even talking about, and being able to not particularly help because of course they're better at it than I am, but it has helped me. It was very much a sort of research-based nutrition masters that I did, so I think that kind of education's coming into schools much more now in the UK anyway. So it's helped me to understand some of the sort of challenges, I guess, that they've had too, which is good.
That's awesome. So your work centers a lot around the gut health and the gut microbiome. Why is this area of nutrition so important to you?
Yeah, it's I can feel myself lighting up when I think about it. To me, it's just like this missing link. Our gut microbiome it's almost like a one-stop shop. So if we can really focus on nurturing our gut microbiome, then it has such broad reaching effects for the potential for the rest of our health, our whole health, all our body systems, because it's all connected and very much protecting our long-term health, but actually right now as well. And I don't think there's any other part of medicine that you can probably have such a potential impact with, because it's a way of really optimizing your health, no matter what life is throwing at you or what your genetics are or what health issues you have. Actually, if you can really kind of get your gut microbiome in the best place possible, it's going to really help you personally, your own sort of landscape of your health to thrive. And so to me it feels like a really worthwhile approach in medicine. And also I think it's just exciting. It's all very new, we're discovering new science around it all the time. And I just love that it's such a natural approach to health. I mean, being a nutritionist is obviously a fairly natural approach to health because you're trying to just use food to drive your best health. But actually your gut microbiome is hugely dependent on food and lifestyle and other things. So yeah, a very natural approach, huge potential, and actually an area that people are really super interested in too, which helps to communicate on it because people are quite thirsty for the knowledge.
Yeah, totally. I'm definitely one of those people, and the more I
Yeah.
learn about it, I'm just blown away and how it
Mm.
links to the soil and everything.
Mm.
And I think people also don't see how your gut microbiome doesn't plays into like your brain and your cognitive function as well. It's
Yeah,
so
yeah,
important for that, and that's a missing
yeah.
link, as you say.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of what I sort of, if I'm working with a group of people or even just one to one, or even if I'm talking, I kind of have this sort of 3 point system in my head all the time, which is helping people sort of reconnect with, your body being very much part of a much bigger ecosystem. So that sort of reconnection piece is sort of at the foundation, I guess, of how I approach nutrition. And so our gut microbiome, when you think about it, it sits in our large intestine right at the end of our digestive system. But that inner tube of our digestive system is open at both ends, if you like. So it's completely connected to the outside world. So in a way, I sort of like to think that our gut microbes are that real interface between our body, our biology, and actually the outside ecosystem. And it's a really great way to remember that we're part of nature and we're connected with that. And I think the more we sort of hold that as well, it can really help our health in all sorts of ways. You just mentioned that sort of gut brain axis, which is incredible on its own, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And that picture that you have, that diagram of how the ecosystems work between the gut soil, and everything is it's just such a great way of visualizing it. I actually used it in a presentation the other week, and I was like referenced you, but I was like, this is just the perfect diagram, and yeah, everyone you could see everyone looking at all the little parts and taking away. So I think people
Like,
are just fascinated. It's almost like it's intuitively know that our gut plays such an important role. So if I bring it back to what you were just saying about food nutritional quality, how does that impact on our gut microbiome? What are you seeing in the work that you do?
yeah, that's a big question at the moment because we're, just getting emerging research coming through about that, and there's certainly a long way to go. So really, if we just kind of take that back one step maybe and just sort of think what we need to do to really nurture our gut microbiome to optimize it, if you like. So we want to obviously eat a sort of diet that's rich in a variety of as many different plants as we can, and we want to reduce sugary food in particular, or food that has additives in it, because we're beginning to learn that all these things have a big impact on the environment where our microbiome sits. But in addition to that, nutrient dense food, we're beginning to kind of understand the importance of that as well. And, ultimately our gut microbes do things from food that we can't do ourselves. So one example would be if you eat like a type of brassica, let's go with watercress, or, something that's got that really punchy, quite bitter flavour. That flavour is coming from the polyphenols, the antioxidants that are in there. And our gut microbes actually are the ones that have an important role in activating that antioxidant for us. So our own biology can do a certain amount, but we rely on our gut microbes to activate that part, that sort of bioactive in that plant for us, so we get more benefit from it. And we know that I'm glad I chose this example. Actually, this is going to work nicely, because we know that when we are farming in those sort of nature-friendly regenerative systems, that those polyphenols are always higher. It's one of the most kind of robust pieces of evidence we have at the moment that those antioxidants are always higher, crops that are farmed in that way. And so, we're getting more in the food. Our microbes are able to do more with that food for us, and that's then really benefiting our health. And anything that we feed our microbes which benefits them, that food source is their energy, so that allows them to multiply and it allows them to grow. So we have a wider ranging gut microbiome as well. So it's very symbiotic. It benefits them, it benefits us, it benefits nature. Yeah, I mean, there's loads more probably that I could say on that, but that's actually probably, quite a good example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the regen side of things, people don't understand what the implications of the practices are when they're not in that field, and how that actually plays an impact on the food quality. Do you have to, well, in the work that you do you communicate that or find an easy way of communicating that to those that aren't familiar with farming practices?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting that it's sort of two parts to that, because actually I'm always amazed when I sort of say, look farmers in the eye and say, you are our food providers. Like without you, we cannot live, basically. And I think farmers often forget that, because they're so busy, they're working so hard. They've got so much to deal with. I don't know how it is for you in New Zealand, but in the UK, we need to do so much more to value our farmers. And so that's a wonderful thing when you remind them that they're actually our food providers. But the other way around then, with perhaps more sort of public facing work that I do, I think people generally are really interested in it once they're reminded of it. And I always like to say, I love to try and bring the story behind our food into nutrition, because it kind of brings the food alive and it helps to tell the story of that food, to then really value the food and appreciate the food. And actually, there's all sorts of positive impacts in just valuing food as far as our health goes. So one of the things actually I love doing is workshops on our local soil association certified farm, and we do them once a month throughout the summer, and we get people, we meet on the farm, we go for a walk around the farm, we talk about the regenerative principles that are happening, and you can actually kind of see it with your own eyes, and there might be sheep or cattle grazing, and we bring in the animal story, and then we share food together, and we just bring the whole thing together. And actually the experience of being on the farm and listening to, the skylarks that might be there, or nature has found nature finds these farms because of that biodiversity. So I think the whole feel-good factor of the experience of being immersed in it is hugely beneficial. And I guess that's the same in all different situations, isn't it? If you experience it for yourself, you're much more likely to embrace it. So I do really like doing that. But yeah, generally, I just find it can be a happy, positive story. And I'm reading a book at the moment actually called How to Fall in Love with the Future. And it's all about sort of visualizing, as a way of helping us all to be motivated to do our part for climate change. And it's all about visualizing what that would look like. Therefore, let's just get on and do it. Because if you can experience it and feel it, and yeah, it just helps with the motivation to be really interested in it. So I think that's probably, when we talk about farming in my world as a nutritionist, it just helps to bring the food alive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people crave that connection back to the people growing their food as well, because a lot of people don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and from just a mental well-being point of view, it's huge. And yeah, getting kids on the farm when they've never been on a farm before is huge. And I mean, even in the whole aspect around, I'm particularly interested, of course, in regenerative farming, nature-friendly farming, because of the quality of the food and how that impacts our health, but also that sort of community aspect of, a farm, that whole regenerative process. I mean, not that we particularly have a definition for it, but it does bring in that whole agroecology side, doesn't it, when we're thinking about how people are impacted too, and the community benefits of having a farm at the centre that's able to, get you onto the farm to come and enjoy food or whatever else is going on, but the farm's supporting its community, so that's a positive impact as well. Yeah, so it's just potentially it's a great system to be part of, but I guess we have this huge problem at the moment that there isn't a lot of financial support for farmers to transition there. So there's a big gap at the moment between the ability of farmers to actually go down that route and also the public's understanding of the benefits. So it's nice to have conversations like this where we're trying to fill that gap, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a common problem worldwide for the funding to take that transition, or the support from, like, if we think about banks here, they would like to support it, but they want to see the data to back up that it's still a profitable farm system and it has all these ecosystem benefits, which is understandable, and people will be working in that space, but we're not quite there yet. I think when we get to that stage, well, that's when we'll see mass adoption. But yeah, regenerative for me is just, it's not just the farming system. It's like, it's actually a business or a concept that impacts and ripples further wide. And to be fair, I think that will eventually happen, and it'll be adopted by other businesses as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you tell us a bit more about the gut project that you're a part of?
Yeah, so that was actually, I founded that quite early on actually as a nutritionist, as I began to realise that there was this incredible connection between what's going on in the soil beneath our feet and the microbes there, and how they impact the food that grows in it, and what's going on in our own gut microbiome, and that there seemed to be this sort of huge bridge to bring that together, kind of just what we've been talking about. And so I just decided I felt like I needed an umbrella name that I was working under, that was constantly trying to bridge the gap. So that's basically what the Gut Project is. And I chose the word project because it still is very much a learning curve. It's ongoing. And I think, that word gut, it kind of brings in all sort of, whether it's our gut instinct or it's actually going on in our gut. But there is just this real, very natural reconnection feeling with humans being part of nature, and how that benefits our health. So the Gut Project was really designed to try and describe the system of that image we were talking about to begin with, where we've got our land and all the biodiversity and the microbes and everything that's going on in that ecosystem. And then we've got our own internal ecosystem of the gut microbiome, and how the two are connected. And yeah, so I basically sort of founded that, and really everything I do comes under that, because I'm constantly trying to help play my part, I guess, in communicating this story to people. And yeah, it now has its own page on my website if anybody wants to go and have a look at that, and just comes up from time to time. I mean, a good example recently would be I was working on a white paper in the UK to try and embed food farming and sustainability into our education system. And so, it was sort of the Gut Project and some of the sort of evidence that I've built up in developing this concept we used then in that. So it's a far-reaching concept. and it's really my response, if you like, to sort of helping this movement.
That's awesome. It's really cool that you're trying to bring that to an educational level as well, because I think that's
Yeah,
where we can get,
yeah,
like, if
yeah.
we're taught this at a younger age, I think it would change a lot of our food choices as we grow up, which ultimately impacts our health. Are you having much success like that with locally?
So I think changing policy is one of the hardest things to do. And I feel like it's gradually coming. You'll have heard, I think, and maybe even seen down in New Zealand, the British film 6 Inches of Soil. I mean, there's
Yep.
been a few other films with trying to communicate a similar process, but they were sort of also behind that process and they still are very much. It's got a real campaign going to try and get this knowledge embedded into education, so that, as you say, children just, it's normal for them. They come out of school and it's just normal. This is normal information that that children grow up with. So, there's a lot of great stuff going on, and it is eventually 100%. It's going to get there, but it's slow. It's always slow, isn't it, to make change?
Mm.
But then at the same time, alongside that, we've got all sorts of initiatives going on where schools just take it upon themselves to try and get this information in there. And the farm that I do my workshops on, they regularly have children coming and visiting. It's a really popular school visit. So, there's all sorts of things going on. It's kind of like a web, isn't it? When you actually, if you mapped it out probably across the world, all these good initiatives that are going on, you just gradually see it kind of diffusing worldwide, and so yeah, I'm really positive about it. I think it's never fast enough, and it's really important to try and impact from the policy level as well. But I think while we're waiting for that change to happen, it's we can all do things in our own community, which is probably the most important work we can do, is where we are right now in our own communities, to try and encourage sharing of this knowledge.
Yeah, I totally agree. Policy is not never going to be fast, and I think you get greater change at a community level. And there's something just nice about creating that community, which I think a lot of people strive for now. It feels like we've lost it a little bit. So people, when they do get back in a community, it's kind of like that rekindling that old feeling that we used to have.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it, when you think about it? So much of this is like going. It's not, well, it's kind of going back, but also we've got technology now, which can be really, really good. So we're still going forward. But what I mean is we're going back to like how our grandparents ate, which was probably a good way of looking at things, because they, before the days of too many processed food, or when we still had a lot of skills around preparing our food, and when we were still much more connected with growing our food. I think there's so much of that. And as you say, just being part of a community is all very much part of that way of living as well, and there's a lot we can draw on that. I mean, you can go, some of my colleagues work with this sort of ancestral piece, that you literally do go a long way back and bring that in to your everyday living as, I'm getting quite deep here, but sort of, well, be the kind of, live the kind of life, or do the right thing for nature, because when you're an ancestor yourself, it would be nice if people remember you as being part of that. But also, if you look back to how our ancestors, we can gain a lot of very good advice from that as well.
Yeah, and they essentially set up the world for us to what we benefit from today. So how are we setting up the world for the future generations? Like, how would I like to leave it for my great grandchildren? Like,
Yeah,
what world
absolutely.
are they going to grow up in?
Yeah,
And what's the
yeah,
quality of their food going to be?
yeah.
Are you seeing quite a interest in that ancestral way? Like, is that picking up in terms of the people you talk to, and people that come to you for your nutritional advice?
Ooh, that's the first time I've ever been asked that question. I don't think I'm seeing increase in interest in it, or it's something that people come to me with. But when I then mention it, then people are really interested in it. So
Yeah.
it's a very niche kind of area, I would say. But one of the ways that we tend to bring that in at the workshops I do is actually by reminding people, if they didn't already know, that our gut microbes kind of bring that ancestral concept to life, because we are sterile before we're born as a baby before birth, and then we get our first colony of microbes during the process of natural childbirth, and so so they are maternal. So the gut microbiome, the sort of origin of it that we all have, you and I have, it's come from our mother, and that has gone back through the ages, and actually microbes were on the planet long before we were. So it's a way of kind of reminding people that we carry with us that ancestry, and I think that can be really quite comforting actually for people to think, oh, that's a nice connection, and it's another way to rooting us and connecting us with that sort of natural world as well. So I think it's definitely growing. I mean, anybody perhaps listening to this or in the world that we work in, it's probably becoming a really interesting piece. And there's been quite a bit of writing and stuff on it, hasn't there? And I think it's really a brilliant way to bring your imagination alive. But yeah, I think it's probably early days on a broad scale.
Yeah, yeah. For those listeners that I guess have probably never heard of it, how would you summarize it up for, I guess, the first time ever hearing it?
So I'm not good at summarizing, but I think a lot of the way I try and bring alive the whole concept of the gut microbiome is by getting people to imagine what's going on in the rest of the ecosystem that we're all part of. And I think once you start people on that journey, and whether it's talking about the gut microbiome builds our resilience, but actually in the soil the gut microbiome is building the resilience of the farming system, or we have this community of microbes inside us, but community around us is really important too. And I think that's probably how I would bring it in. It's visualizing that this is something it's historic. I mean, as I mentioned, our microbes have been on the planet long before we have, and we've evolved with them, so they're really vital in our health. So actually, when you think of how our ancestors lived and how they looked after the world for us, and our microbiome is still connected back to them, it can just help people to feel rooted and to feel like this is really worth looking after. Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And even just the skills that we need to look after our health, that, in preparing food and in growing food even, our ancestors had those skills or different versions of those skills, and we're losing them. So, it's trying to motivate people to let's try and make sure we are still teaching that to our children. And yeah, I think I use it as a sort of motivational piece probably.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. So if we bring it back to around the education piece, do you think nutritionists have a role to play in educating farmers on how their practices influence our food?
Yeah, I mean, farmers I think are incredible, and they have, they're artists, they're biologists, they're scientists, they're juggling so many different skills at the same time. So I guess my role would be supporting them in one particular part of that. And I think, interestingly, so when I was speaking at Groundswell this year, our sort of UK regenerative farming festival, and always aware that you're talking to farmers in the audience. It's a mainly farmer-facing conference, although there were health practitioners and all sorts of other people there. But I always know my place, which is, you guys really have this really hard job and a lot of skill that you build up over a long period of time, and particularly in the field of regenerative farming, where it's not really taught. You're having to teach yourself, and it's trial and error and really hard, really, really tough. So I think I see myself as being able to give good news, which hopefully motivates them to want to keep going or to want to try regen farming. And, that good news is that we're beginning to understand that the food that comes out of these regenerative farming systems is beneficial to our health in so many ways. And so if I can sort of show the evidence of that, and others that I work with, and then lots of other people are doing the same, then it helps to motivate them to do that, particularly at a time where so many are sort of transitioning into regen, and it's a hard time financially. Any good news is really, really well received. So that's part. I think that's very much how I see my role as a nutritionist. I think I'm really fortunate that I just have found myself, literally never planned this out. I found myself in this situation where I have the food story from being a vet on the farm, on a dairy farm, to now being a nutritionist, seeing the impact of that food at the other end of the food spectrum. So I have that broad experience that I can bring to this, and so I suppose I'm just really well placed to do that. And it's lovely to see other nutritionists are really getting interested in it and beginning to want to learn more about regen farming so that they understand it as well. But it's a small space for nutritionists. I was unusual in having teaching on the gut microbiome. I think I was really, really lucky. But I do think there is a responsibility that we have, those of us that do have it, to really share it, because until that teaching is in the medical profession, and it's just seeping in now. It's still very
Mm.
small, and our doctors are so busy they don't necessarily have time to learn it. So I think those of us that do hold that knowledge, have a real responsibility to share it and to help kind of spread the message on it.
That's awesome. I love that you're using it as a motivation piece rather than trying to be like, you need to do this,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. In terms of the nutrition space, are you seeing more and more with other professionals starting to pick up this gut microbiome piece?
Yeah, there's definitely a huge interest in it. And, I think there's still, I'm kind of, I guess I always, when I started out as a nutritionist, I knew that the gut microbiome was going to be the way I went, because it just seemed to be why wouldn't you? It's, such a far reaching consequences. So we all have our specializations, but there's definitely more and more interest in it. I think the problem I find is that I don't know what this would be really interesting to understand what this is like in New Zealand, but there is another sort of responsibility, I think, which is helping people to understand that term plant-based, because it's gone kind of crazy over here. And it's whenever I ask people just out of interest, what do you think that term means? Majority of people will say it just means eating plants. It means avoiding animal foods. It means vegan. It means definitely vegetarian. And actually, with all the sort of media hype and marketing around plant-based foods, and then therefore they're good for gut health because it's plants, there's an important area for those of us with the knowledge to sort of just say, well, hang on a minute, actually plant-based, it means like 2/3 of your plate should be filled with plants, but actually the other third you'd be, as well, to fill it with really high quality animal protein type foods if you so wish, because they have huge benefit to our health as well. And we know that doesn't have any bad effect on our gut microbiome to still keep including those foods. And also, of course, those animals may well be importantly part of a sort of regen farming system too. So, and so many plant-based foods are very processed, and that's an issue. So I think it's easy to jump on the gut health bandwagon, if you like, from a sort of, well, everyone loves it. And, but I think we have to be careful that we're still communicating the right message about it. Otherwise, it sort of becomes kind of like greenwashing. We're getting a bit carried away with not always the right kind of foods in promoting gut health.
Yeah, I would probably say that it'd be very similar here in the understanding of plant-based. Like even my brain, as soon as you said it, was like, all plants.
Yeah.
But what you're explaining is just, I'd say, a typical, the diet I grew up on, like your meat and 3 veg sort of thing.
Yeah.
Most of the plates vegetables, and then you got your piece of meat or protein there that is your main source of protein. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I think that's probably, like you said, is probably something that educationally wise everyone needs to change their mind on. Or be educated.
It's just again, it's just sharing, because there isn't really a sort of, well, there is a definition of plant-based actually, and that was it. The sort of 60% plants, or 2/3 plants, 1/3 animal protein is what we tend to go with, and I think it's just a really helpful thing to give a little bit of clarity on. And I think we always tend to overcomplicate everything, and certainly with food, it's so, if we can just bring everything back and simplify everything, that actually is another way that can really help gut health, because we're trying to get away from all the processing, and the world of nutrition is so complex. And I would say most people come to me because they're overwhelmed by food and they don't really know where to start. Everyone was told one thing one week and one thing another, and it's another reason why I enjoy working with the gut microbiome is that it gives people one, I think I mentioned at the beginning, it's like a one-stop shop. It gives people one route. If you go down that route, and the main rules, if you like, that we have in place to really optimize your gut health, it often works for many other health issues that people might be dealing with as well. So it's a nice way of trying to just narrow down your food choices too.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Like, there's so much information around what diet's good for you, what's not, you shouldn't be eating this, and all sorts. How do you cut through that? And it's just so confusing for just anyone who's not really super interested in where their food's from.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just back to that, what you were just saying, like you grew up on meat and 2 veg, and, it's trying to simplify for people and bring it all back. And in a way, that's why telling the story behind the food is really important, because it's, like if you take dairy, for example, dairy has a lot of bad press generally. I think it's certainly in the UK part, a lot of that around people's concerns around animal welfare, and maybe, some people do have real kind of life threatening allergy with dairy, but very few actually. And so I think that's just a good example of how we can simplify things. So you can either choose to go with that and then walk down the aisle in the supermarket, where you're then faced with a whole aisle, in fact, of plant drinks. And there'll be 5 or 6 types of almond, 5 or 6 types of soy, and so it goes on. And it's just like, whoa, where do I begin? And actually, a few of those have a place for sure. But if you just bring it back to dairy, when you actually think about the value of those animals in a regenerative farming system, but firstly, and the lovely sort of stories that you can tell about that. And then dairy as a food is a brilliant example of a food that just in its simplest form, in a mug of milk, I do have a mug here, it's sadly not for the milk, but in its simplest form, all those nutrients within the sort of matrix of dairy are all working together to help us absorb them. So if we drink a glass of milk, the protein in that milk helps us to absorb the calcium, and there's no other food that we can get calcium from in such an easy, accessible way than we can from dairy, and calcium is really so vital in our health. So I think I try and simplify the issue by sort of actually getting people to think about the foods that they're avoiding. I do it with bread as well, because bread is seen as a bit of a villain, and yet it should be a really healthful food. So it's telling the story of that food. It's no one's fault that they haven't thought about it in that way. It's just that the media tends to drive us to think about these foods in that way. And of course, we do need to be eating less animal protein and replacing that with more pulses and other types of plants. But it's not this extreme version all the time. And then well, let's replace bacon with something that looks like bacon, but it's actually a very processed form of a 100% plant-based food. So I think that's how I simplify, is pulling right back to, let's think about these foods in our country that we have that should be staples in our diet, and the potential benefits that they give you, and how that all works in with our gut health.
Since we're talking about dairy, I've got a one for you. What are your thoughts on the whole raw milk thing that seems to be getting ever so popular on social media at the moment?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Is that something that's really taking off in New Zealand? Is it?
It's very hard to source is the problem. Even though we've got so much dairy, it's very hard to buy it from a legitimate source. So
okay, yeah. So in this country, it's probably similar, but in a smaller way. There are raw milk dairies, and they are highly regulated. So they just know that they can't sell that milk unless they're testing it and it's safe to drink. And so I think it's funny. I have a colleague who's a real expert within the sort of cheese world, and he's fascinated by raw milk and actually the potential health benefits of it. But we've worked together to try and accumulate evidence on it, but there really isn't enough. That's the whole problem. And that can sound like a bit of a scapegoat when we're talking, but it is true. When you're trying to work in an evidence-based way, if you don't particularly have that, it's hard to take it any further. So it's probably what all we sort of go with raw milk is that I personally believe it to be really healthful food. It's logical that it is. It's a very natural food. It's full of wonderful, naturally probiotic elements. And if you're a healthy person, if you're not immunocompromised, I wouldn't recommend it during pregnancy, the usual kind of story around it. That's what we go with still. And I can't really go beyond that. But if I had the chance to drink it, I do.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So would I. And you mentioned bread before. What are your rule of thumbs around bread? Because as you say, everyone's always seems to be scared of bread and what it's going to do to them if they eat it.
Yeah, bread for me is like it can really bring understanding food and our health alive. So let me see if I can do this quickly. So it's a really good example. So if you take like just a sliced, very in fact processed loaf, probably wrapped in plastic on a supermarket shelf, even if it's wholemeal, even if it's got seeds added, even if it looks healthy, or it's even branded in a way that sort of suggests it's healthy, and you compare that very industrially produced loaf with let's go the other extreme, which would be, has to be a loaf of sourdough. And I always apologise for being a nutritionist talking about sourdough because it seems a bit stereotypical. But anyway, so sourdough's up at the sort of top of the pedestal, and your industrial loaf is further down. And if you look on the label of that industrially produced loaf of bread, despite all the sort of whole grain aspect of it, it'll probably have like 15 or 16 different ingredients in it to help preserve it, to help with the mouth feel of it, to add back in some nutrients that have been lost in the milling process. And you end up with this food that is not really what bread should be. And also when you eat it, it just dissolves in your mouth. You don't have to chew it because it's just, it's a nice mouthfeel, but it's soft. And then you think about a loaf of sourdough that is just flour, salt, and water. And all the natural yeasts within that flour are very slowly allowing that sourdough the dough to rise in a slow fermentation, and you develop all the flavours and you develop all the goodness and the extra nutrition that's in there as a result of that very slow fermentation process from microbes. You have this incredibly healthful food with a hard crust and with a chewy dough, so we have to use our muscles to chew it well, which actually helps with our appetite mechanism that we all have to make sure it works well for us to help us feel full when we should feel full. And so there's so much to say about bread, that it should be one of our staple foods and it should give us a lot of health. And generally people, if you have, an intolerance to gluten in wheat, as long as it's not something fairly serious like celiac, where you really, really do have to be careful. If it's a sort of an undiagnosed intolerance where perhaps you get a little bit bloated on eating bread, then actually if you try sourdough, the gluten in that is really broken down before you even eat it. So I think there's so much that's good about proper, real bread compared to the industrial version that is easier to find. And a lot of this is about taking more time in life, just giving yourself a little bit of time to source these foods or to even make them at home. It doesn't matter what a sourdough loaf looks like. They generally look terrible when you first start making them, but they always taste absolutely awesome. So, and it can be a very mindful, very relaxing, a very good for the soul thing to do, which is good for our health.
And it generally always tastes better as well when you're taking the time to curate something like that as well.
Yeah.
So what's some simple changes or choices that the listeners could make today to support their gut health?
Yeah, so I'm sure they might know many. So that diversity of plants, and remembering that it's not just fruit and veg. So you've got pulses and beans, and even spices and herbs can be a valuable part of adding in extra diversity to your diet. Nuts and seeds and cereals and grains, and it's the whole spectrum. So that variety is really important. Fermented foods, little and often, because the microbes are changing inside us all the time. So the more you bring more on board with fermented foods that have live microbes in them, the better. And then, I could be really boring and say avoid the ultra processed foods and everything else, but actually it's also things like slowing down in life. I actually had that as top of the list recently on somebody else I was speaking to. And, if you feel you're somebody that carries a lot of tension or anxiety, or you're always on the go, that stress management is, as important as the food that you eat. I know we're all about food, talking about that today, but the impact on our health that stress has is enormous, and particularly on our gut microbiome. There's some really, really interesting research that's coming through on all of that. So taking time out, just whether it's like a little bit of breathing for properly doing a breathwork meditation, maybe for 10 minutes, doing a little bit of yoga, stepping outside, hearing the birds in the garden, taking time to enjoy preparing food, just, all these things are ways of doing that. So I'd say that's really high on my list, actually. And finding out what's around in your community, like who can you source food from locally, where they might be doing their bit for nature. You'll meet great people, and you might be able to go and volunteer somewhere yourself and help them, which is also a great thing to do. Yeah, could go on and on, but I think those would be my top things.
Yeah, I love that piece about slowing down, because many of us are just rushing to get to somewhere, and the journey along the way is where the enjoyment is, and when we get to the end we realise we probably should have slowed down. So I think it's a really key piece, and that piece around the nervous system regulation, I think, is not often talked about as well.
Exactly.
And I wrap up all my podcasts with a couple of quick fire questions. The first one is, if you could change one thing about the agricultural industry as a nutritionist, what would it be?
So I just think it needs to be central to our health service, and food serves our health, and it serves the planet as well, the planetary health, in the way it's farmed. So it's putting it central to our health system. Gabe Brown always says, preventative medicine should be on the end of your fork. So I love that. So that for me is what we need to do with our agricultural system, is hold it in that place.
I totally agree, and I find it far-fetched that our food system and our health systems are so far apart. There's no real
Yeah.
communication going on between the two.
Well, that's why these podcasts that you're doing and others like you are so important, because they're trying to share that message.
Yeah, 100%. That's probably one of the key messages I would like to
Yeah.
share with the wider community, is that
Yeah.
they need to be working together.
Mm.
So looking back at your younger self, what's one piece of advice you'd give?
To, like you've just said, actually enjoy the journey, because I think we all, and even more so nowadays, young people are driven to just keep pushing, keep, as in with a career or with learning, or there's a lot of stresses on young people, and it's like you're always trying to get to the next achievement. And actually, by just taking a step back, it's quite courageous to take time out of that and learn about the world that you're in and your place in it. Just enjoy that journey, because you will evolve, you will grow, you will find your place. And I'm probably doing now, and I'm 56, what I feel like I'm doing what I always wanted to do, but I've only been doing it for 10 years. So you really do have to try and enjoy that journey and think about success in that way. It doesn't have to always be a financial success at all. Success, that's very much a sort of regenerative principle, isn't it? Success is your impact in the world and with others, and how your health is, because you're not rushing and you're not too stressed. And so that's a sort of fairly vague and long-winded way of that would have been my message to myself, is just slow down and enjoy the journey.
Well, it's certainly a message I need to hear as well. It's something I've been thinking more about recently, is how much work I'm doing to get to the next thing. But the reason I started this business and to do my own thing was so I had more freedom to do the things I like doing, and I don't do them.
Yeah.
So how do I incorporate that?
Yeah, I think too, that's so hard, because actually in this space of, being part of the jigsaw puzzle to help our planet and our health in a very natural way, there feels like such an urgency, doesn't there? So it's really hard to slow yourself down.
Yeah, you get excited.
It's far
you wanna do
easier
more
said
and
than
more.
done. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's something that excites you at the moment?
Well, this space, for sure. I mean, I'm always saying to people, there is so much hope. The whole soil to gut, the interest in that is what excites me. And, I see it this year particularly. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's just like this explosion, really, like this revolution that's just breaking out, and wanting to know more about it, and farmers doing more with it. Even in the UK, we're starting to see our government interested in, from a health aspect, what is this link? And so that I find really exciting. And yeah, we can moan about it and we can say that it's too slow and it's going to take ages to get everybody on board, but it's there, and that's what I find exciting, that I'm able to work in that space too.
Yeah, and that excites me as well. It's the opportunity is so great, and I think that's what excites me. There's a lot of negative stuff we can focus on, but if we focus on the opportunity that's before us, like, that's what gets me out of bed every day.
Yeah, amazing.
So what is a force of nature to you?
Do you know, I was thinking about this yesterday, and I was going to throw it right back at you and say nature.
Yeah.
I guess that's too easy, because
Yeah.
nature is my force of nature. I mean, it's 7 o'clock in the morning in the UK when we started recording this. And even though I needed to be prepared for that, and I do tend to wake up early, I still made a point of going outside and walking barefoot across the grass, because I find that just brings my biology alive and helps me personally. And so that is, nature is genuinely my force of nature. But I think, to kind of perhaps not go with such an easy one, it's together, like it's doing things with people. It's realizing that, the more we do good stuff together, the more powerful it is and the more fun it is. And I know, being freelance, that my force of nature is probably the people as well that I work with. I come off a call and I think, oh wow, it was so inspiring. And surrounding yourself with like-minded, aligned individuals can be like really massive and really positive. And so I would say I'll go with that one.
Yeah. I had that feeling yesterday, coming off a call with a couple of like-minded people at a project I'm working on, and it's just, you're just like, wow, like there's just so much excitement and opportunity here, and you're all thinking along the same lines, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if someone wants to follow along with what you do and connect with you, what's the best way to keep in touch?
Oh, thank you. So, probably good old social media. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, and all as Lucy Williamson Nutrition. Or if you just head to my website, which is lwnutrition.co.uk, there's everything we've talked about is on there, and links through to my social media. There's blogs on there. There's even a way to book a call with me and just have a chat about, an idea. Yeah, that's the best way to keep in touch. And I really enjoy like connecting with people. I love that about my job.
Yeah, yeah, so do I. I'll put links to those down below so everyone can just click straight through. But thank you very much for your time today, Lucy. It's been fantastic to talk about the subject.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Colin. I mean, it's just like a really inspiring way to start the day. So, yeah, really enjoyed sharing all that with you. And thanks for reaching out.
No problem.